agriculture is my passion, and therefore I wish I could be with you today for this particular event. Let me say that I'm very grateful to Dr. Sanginga of IITA and the entire staff of IITA for organizing this particular event. Let me welcome all the Director Generals of all the CGIAR centers. Let me welcome all the donors, and let me welcome the private sector, the youth, and all the entrepreneurs in agriculture that have all shown up for this particular meeting. I know that it's a very, very important meeting, especially after the meeting you all had in Washington, D.C. Ladies and gentlemen, agriculture is the future for Africa. When I take a look today at the economic headwinds facing Africa, the question that we always ask is, what will Africa do? How will Africa diversify its economies? And into what should it diversify its economies? There is no doubt in my mind that agriculture is where Africa should diversify into, for very good reason. Today, Africa has 75% of all the arable land to feed 9 billion people in the world by 2050. Today, Africa has massive amount of water, great sunshine, a lot of cheap labor. Literally almost anything you throw into the air, before it hits the ground, it can grow in Africa. Therefore, Africa must become a global powerhouse in food and agriculture. For way too long, we have looked at agriculture as a way of life. We've looked at it as something that we use as a sector to manage poverty, or should I say, just simply maintain the status quo in which the lives of people do not change in rural areas. No, we have to change our perspective completely. Agriculture is a business. Agriculture is, in fact, the biggest business in the world. Today, Africa spends $35 billion a year importing food. If we do nothing between now and 2030, Africa will spend, by 2030, $110 billion a year importing food. That is food that Africa should be producing. That is food Africa should be processing. That is hard-earned foreign exchange that Africa should actually be keeping here to stabilize its economy. Therefore, we must begin to take agriculture as central to how African economies will have strong macroeconomic and fiscal stabilization. That is why, when I became president of the African Development Bank, I convened within 2 weeks of my starting as president a big meeting in Dakar called the High-Level Meeting on Agriculture for Africa. Many of you were there at that meeting, and I was very pleased to see many of you there. And I'm very grateful that many of you continued to be passionate about agriculture post-Dakar High-Level Conference meeting. What did we agree in Dakar? We agreed in Dakar that 4 things had to happen for African agriculture. First is that we must end hunger, and we must also end malnutrition. Second is that we must use agriculture to significantly reduce the level of food imports that Africa has today. That we must allow Africa to get to the top of the value chains in every single thing that it produces, not to remain at the bottom of the value chain. And finally, that Africa must become a big net exporter of food, and therefore must build on its comparative advantage. It is about time for Africa to achieve its own total transformation. This time, that transformation will not just be about just technology for food production. That technology is important, but that transformation this time must be about the value chains. We must include the private sector. We must make sure that there's processing and adding value to every single thing that we produce. And we must ensure that we make the right investments in infrastructure, in market development, in finance and mechanization to make agriculture quite exciting for our young people. And why do I say for young people? If you take a look at it today, the population of young people that are in agriculture is actually pretty dismal. The population of those that are producing for us today are old farmers. I went to a village school. I recall at that time that they were old. Today, they are still very old people trying to feed us. Isn't it surprising that farmers that are supposed to feed us in many countries today in Africa are lining up asking for food aid? That has to change. That means we must change the labor composition of the agricultural sector in Africa. We must get younger people into the agricultural sector. I am delighted that with you many that there today are many of the IITA agripreneurs, they call them. I love them. They are very passionate. They are very dynamic. They make things happen. I've seen what they're doing there, and I want to make sure that we support them to be able to become the new generation of young commercial farmers for Africa. It is my great pleasure to let you know the bank strongly supports this because we know that we face a job crisis in Africa today. We have entering the labor market 100 million young people by 2030. We have to create jobs for them. I submit to you that agriculture is a fantastic sector to create those jobs for them. We must get them to see agriculture in a different way. Agriculture as a business, not agriculture as a way of life. The success stories are all over there in Nigeria. Young people that are all getting into fish, livestock production. They are all getting into production of fruits and processing and all of that. I'm excited about this. You are the future of Africa. I look at the Democratic Republic of Congo, where a lot of this is also going on. I am delighted that the African Development Bank will be able to support what we call the Enable Youth Initiative to help Africa's youth to become the future commercial farmers of Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, the importance of your meeting cannot be overemphasized. Africa waits for the outcome of this meeting so that all across Africa, from the Guinea savannas to the Sahelian region to the humid forest area, let us work together to unlock the potential of agriculture on this continent. Let us work together to make sure that Africa can feed itself. Let us work together to make sure Africa becomes a global powerhouse in food and agriculture. Your meeting today will allow us to unlock those potentials as you focus on the issue of youth that are so fundamental into how we create a new generation of dynamic farmers going forward. I wish I could be there with you, but I can tell you, I await with great passion the outcomes of your meetings. I wish you very good deliberations, and I look forward to the outcome. And thank you very much for coming.